Yeah, ridiculously early for you. And
Oh,
when Andy told me how early it was for you, I almost vomited at the thought of having to get up at that. So
May we also apologize? James has got a terrible signal because his internet has not exactly installed itself correctly. So we don't have a very good James at his end, unfortunately.
well, we have an amazing James. It's just
Well,
not
that's fair.
translating very well through the video.
yeah.
Anyway, let's dive in.
Right, yes, let's dive in indeed. Welcome. Right, I'll go back to my very first spiel. So, welcome to our very special guest, Steve Dee. We're talking about Steve's journey from WFRP to the score, a freelancer's odyssey. We've got quite a few questions pre-submitted for you, Steve, but we would love to hear just a little bit more about your journey in this crazy industry.
Yeah, I mean that's a very big question. I've been doing a lot of freelancing, and I've done a lot of self-publishing, and it's I think it's good to do both. I think I mean some things suit people more than others, and some at different times. But it's good to not pick one or the other necessarily that's going to suit you at any, some people are all about, well, this is my definition of success. But a career is a flexible thing, and it's good to try different things and have different things in your toolbox.
I think even in lots of sort of corporate world where, traditionally in the world that I work in my day job, in the world of banking, people would have joined as graduates right out of school. They would have worked their way up through the branches, become bank managers, or in the graduate program, you would become a senior manager. And then you just sort of progress through the career, and more with kind of retirement dates, ages getting later, people are accepting that you'll have phases of your career. You might do a phase that's really quite intensive, and then you might take a step sideways to do something else, and then you might come back in. And more, they're sort of mix and match portfolio careers.
Yes.
And sorry, on you go.
No, go. Yeah.
I just want to jump to some specific questions that Seagoat has asked. The score looks interesting, as do your other games. And his question is, do you find it harder to make a game with a significant impact in today's saturated market? But before we get to that, I would just like to explore his statement, the score looks interesting. Can you tell us a bit more about the score?
Yeah, absolutely. So the score is a 18-card, 18-minute role-playing game. It was designed originally for a competition, but we've developed it since then. It's designed to emulate the heist genre, and using that the way that heists flip expectations and switch between the past and the future to allow people to just really jump into the improvisation element of it. We use cards with talents on them that describe. Every character gets a series of talents, and when your card comes up with your talent, you're going to have a scene that allows you to take the center stage and describe how your talent helps the heist. And that means that you have to do less sort of what is my character going to do, because the card is telling you and it's giving you this prompt. So it's a little bit like For the Queen in that sense, but there's even more direction, even more description from the cards. It's a little bit like James's game Once Upon a Time, but it's collaborative, and it's a bit more compact.
It sounds really interesting. Actually, I can't remember if it was last week or a few weeks ago, we were talking about that very challenge in role-playing games when sort of experienced TTRPG players come together with less experienced ones. And sometimes those less experienced ones can feel very intimidated and don't. I was talking about Seventh Sea and its kind of system of having to tell really cool stories and kind of me just freezing up. So that sounds like it sort of solves a problem. Yeah. That has existed in role-playing games for a long time.
Yeah, that was one of my goals, is that to try and solve as many of the sort of problems that people have of getting into an RPG. So it's very short, it's very quick to learn, it's very portable. You don't have a huge character sheet. Character sheet is literally the size of a card. And yeah, it gets around that sort of thing of the deer in headlights of, well, if I can do anything, my character can do anything, what do I do? It's and to get there, you have to sort of take away a little bit of that kind of enormous control that people do like to have. They don't get to make as many choices, but in return, any people can just feel like they can play an RPG when they feel like they couldn't before.
Seagoats follow up the heist genre: Ocean's 11 or Layer Cake, or something.
I haven't seen Layer Cake, I'm afraid. I have been watching as many as I possibly can, but I haven't seen Layer Cake yet. Ocean's 11 is very good, and they're all very, very good. And we tried to be as expansive as possible to let you play any kind of heist. You start by generating exactly what you're stealing and where, and there's some very, very open options on the cards that let you pick sort of all sorts of things.
Do you know what? I really like the sound of this, because we were watching a heist movie the other day, Andy, or was it a heist movie? Was it a different kind of movie? But they employed that irritating heist trope. In Ocean's 11 was like really novel. Maybe it was novel in the sting, actually. Like, you have to go quite far back. But that trope of they're in a room planning it and they're describing it, but they're showing you the scenes from it and their description is going in, and then inevitably something goes wrong. And I was just saying to Andy, like, this is dull. It was like cool when they did it in Ocean's 11, but I've seen this now so many times that as a film tool, boring, but as a role play tool, doing it myself, yes, interesting. I want to do that. I don't want to watch it again in a film, but I definitely want to do it myself. I can't remember what film it was we were watching, Andy.
Yes, so there's basically the series of cards that we have, which look sort of like this. If there are some cards that get dealt out, and there are some cards that don't get dealt out. And if you draw a card that you don't have in certain phases, then that's the bit where you describe that well-worn trope where they talk about what they can't do or how hard things are. So if you get sleight of hand or something, and nobody has sleight of hand, then you go, well, these guys are just experts. They're all wearing, special decontamination suits, so nobody can pick any pockets or something. And so, and people do know these tropes really well. And yeah, it is actually very fun to be like, I know how this works and I can do it better. Someone actually said that they'd seen Kaleidoscope on Netflix, which I don't know if you guys got, which is the one you can watch out of order. It was a heist movie on Netflix, heist series. And they were like, they were like, it wasn't very good, but at least this game will wash the taste out of my mouth. So yeah, we're finding people that are going to be like, I can do better, and that's great.
What I'm particularly enjoying from listening to this is that you've, I think, targeted a very precise area, which is that transition between those who play board games and those who role play, those who are perhaps interested in role playing but haven't necessarily taken that dive yet. And there's been quite a number of games that have attempted to fill that storytelling space, but they almost always hit around about the 45-minute mark. Which means that those few who might perhaps be a touch uncomfortable have a long time to feel uncomfortable in, because 45 minutes, if you're feeling uncomfortable, is forever. Where 18 minutes is actually really short. And if you say that right at the beginning, it's going to go super fast. Okay, and we're going to zip right through it. That means even those who are a little bit unsure go, okay, well, I don't actually have long to give it a go, so I'll just dive straight in, and it changes the mental mindset. Just to make an example, we had a game called The Hen Commandments by, who was that by? Terrible Games, I think, which was a really crazy game where you created a crazy religion about hens and eggs.
It was the guy behind Terrible. Yeah, Drew, can't think of his name.
Yeah, I can't remember either. It's really annoying me off the top of my head. Doesn't matter. But it was a 45-minute game, and we played that with both role players and board game players. And the role players really got into it. The board game players, they often got quite uncomfortable because they weren't quite sure how they should best tackle the individual situations. And it meant that that game had to either be sidelined or pitched in a very different way to how it was described in the rule book to try and make sure you got the best out of it for different audiences. But it appears that you've managed to hit that lovely little sweet spot right in the middle, where you'll be able to hopefully bridge both types of gamer into one game. And that is just, oh yes.
Yeah, that was really a goal, to try to almost sort of trick people into playing a role-playing game without them sort of backing off. As you say, it's very short and it's got a lot of structure to help. And we've been really rewarded when people have been playing, like, oh, and they say things like, I normally don't like these kind of games, but I was absolutely fine here. I was able to do this. It came along naturally. And yeah, by being short, by feeling almost like a card game or a party game, it's really capturing those people who might never play a role-playing game. And that was really important, because I think we've ended up very almost narrowly defining an RPG. I mean, there's lots of variety in the indie markets, but they're all in fixing the mainstream. It's really still living like D&D. You get a character sheet that looks like a tax form. You're going to play for 4 hours at a time. You're going to probably play several weeks at a time, and you are going to be basically making a fair amount of combat or tactical moves. And I think there's a lot more different ways to play role-playing games, and a lot more different ways to approach that question. And so we don't even use the word RPG in any of our marketing at the moment, because again, we want to sort of we want to get through that assumption and just go play this and see what you think, and then you can decide if it's an RPG or not. Try to sort of get people to play a role-playing game without thinking about all those other things that might make them go, oh, no, I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
By
the way, would you mind just showing up the cards to the camera a little bit more closely so people can see?
Yeah, sure. Yep. So,
and we also have a link. What happened there? Oh, brilliant. Yeah. Excellent.
Look at that.
So every card has
magic.
A thing that you might be stealing and a target, a location. And at the start of the game, you draw 3 of these to generate which ones you want to steal. And then in the middle, we have the talent, and you get dealt a few of those. So you might be good at stealth, and depending on the number of players is how many you get. And then these are shuffled back into the deck, and when and where they come out
when you get the stealth card. When you get this, do you have to make that noise that box makes in that game that Andy plays?
Oh, what? Yeah, Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
Ring.
Ring.
Yes.
That was our artist who just felt that image was very appropriate.
It's brilliant.
How else do you illustrate that these days?
Yeah, exactly. We didn't want to just have an empty picture.
I want to throw in Score is kickstarting right now, and people should go to Kickstarter and back it.
I have
Sendley, you've got the link.
I've got the link. It's going in the chat. It's in the chat earlier, but it's going in the chat again.
It's still freezing from time to time. Brilliant.
Yeah.
The other thing is that it sounds like the Score, which I haven't played, is clearly drawing on or developing some of the ideas from.
Oh, you're freezing. You're freezing.
Yeah, this game. There's Been a Murder, which is a very small number of cards. Oh, can you hear me?
I can't.
It's coming and going. I apologize. Talk about There's Been.
Yeah, we heard you enough to get the gist of what you wanted him to say. So, Steve, there's been a murder.
Yeah, so There's Been a Murder was also designed originally as an 18-card game. We eventually expanded it a little bit. It was designed, again, to be... I really like Love Letter. I like some of the ideas. I like games that are compact, and but I also really love cooperative games. So There's Been a Murder was designed to be a cooperative love letter. And it's very much a simple deduction game where you're trying to figure out there's 18 or more cards depending on the number of players. One card is a murderer and one card is a detective. You are trying to work out who is holding the murderer and then play the detective so they reveal their card. And all the other cards are things that let you look at a card or swap a card or share information, but you can't talk about your cards. As we say, it's the 1920s. It's England, of course, and the British aren't going to talk about anything like that. They're going to talk about the weather.
Very proper.
Okay.
In fact, originally we had a card that was called the American, and they were the one that is allowed to talk. So we then it became the drunk, and then it became the gossip, I think, because they were worried about kids. But yeah, so you're trying to remember things and communicate limitedly to share this information, and it's again it's a relatively simple sort of concept. Every card has its instructions on it, just like Love Letter. You're moving information around. Yeah, we've been really lucky. That was picked up by a company called Pressman, who is owned by Goliath now, which is one of the sort of big things like Hasbro, but they're sort of originally based, in Asia. And because of that, we're in Walmarts and Targets and stuff in the US, and we've managed to sell really lots and lots of copies.
When I heard the title of it, I immediately something sprung to mind. But what I'm hearing is it's more like Gosford Park. There's been a murder than Taggart. There's been a murder. Just to be clear.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit Taggart. Like that phrase was in my head. And it's good that sort of a lot of Americans completely missed the reference. But yes, it is. That was the original inspiration for the phrase. But yes, it is more Gosford Park indeed.
So you have touched upon this a bit, but let maybe go into it in a bit more detail. So Roderick asks, what do you feel the medium of card games provides as a designer that pen and paper RPGs don't?
I think, as I say, a lot of it is to do with structure and also with focus. We have this idea that, especially if you the original version of role-playing games was actually designed to be played with a map and miniatures. They really were. And that's supposed to be the thing in the middle of the table. And we've gone, we're going to use our imagination, so we'll take that away. And that actually means that the only thing that really works with the only physical item that's actually on the table that people are interacting with is your character sheet and occasionally a dice, which means you're all very sort of in your own corner looking at your own sheet, and there's no interaction with other people really. I think that's actually a really big problem with role-playing games, is that you don't even often know what's on other people's sheets. You have no idea. You might I often make up little tags every time I play a role-playing game at a con. I make up a little diagram of who everyone is, their character and their class or something like that, so I can actually just go, you're this person, you're that person, and I make a name tag for myself as well. But that's all there to solve the fact that you are looking down at a character sheet that is very isolating. And when you introduce things, whether they're a card or a board or something, you actually draw the intention back up into the middle into shared assets. And the cards are particularly good because you can pass them around. And so what happens in the score is that if it's your turn to talk, if at the start of a turn you draw a card, and if it's got someone's ability on it, you pass it over to them. And that means it's their turn to take the stage, and they get that physical thing of, this is my card, this is mine, I get to, and that means it enhances that sense of it's me. And also you keep your cards in front of you, so if someone hasn't spoken for a while, you know that it's their turn to speak because they haven't got many cards. So it's a simple little tracking mechanism that you can do with cards. And I think that there's a lot of things that we can explore, that board games has all these enormous tools and cards that you can use elements for, that we don't do because pen and paper RPGs, all you've got is a character sheet. And some of the things that we've done with character sheets have really helped with that. Like I think it was Blades in the Dark had the word salad idea and things like that, of just putting, and the Apocalypse game put a lot of information on that character sheet of how to talk and what to say. And people responded to that instantly because I need ideas. And they actually put them on the sheet. And it might be very hard to pick up on the camera, but all across the back of our cards, we have jargon, similar sort of idea.
There we go.
So if you need ideas,
Okay.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
see him. Yeah.
You can just
Yeah.
turn to the back of a card and get some jargon as well.
I like that.
So,
Good design.
Good to
they're
see.
all,
Yeah.
it's all the same sort of paragraph, but all slightly different oriented, so you can see different information. So that I think is I mean, I think one of the things that a couple of things, that Blades and Apocalypse World did really well was giving you more stuff with the items, with the pieces, the components, as they say, and
I think
go.
I think it's quite interesting. We've talked about it on many streams ago, but the English and therefore our understanding of role-playing games is constrained by our language in the way that other languages aren't, because they have 2 words for play. They have like a word that means to play a game with rules and a word to mean the games that children play. So while many people's first experience of TTRPG, what would have been a map and minis, etc., most people's experience of role playing is in the UK now, in early learning, it's called free play, is that imaginative free play that children do. And I think for me, that's one of the reasons I think licenses are so successful, not only because those were the things we played in the playground, but because the license provides the shared backdrop that means you are at your character sheet, but when Andy says something to us about Star Wars and about an Imperial transport, we all know that we share the idea of that Imperial transport, and it brings the game to life in a way that when you're creating your own, unless it's quite, I love the idea of the jargon on the back to bring that world to life. But I do think that licensed games have more for them in terms of bringing role-playing to life than just, well, they're popular because they're licensed.
No, I absolutely agree, and I've always been a huge champion for licensed RPGs for exactly that reason. It lets people all be on the same page, and it's really easy to assume everyone's on the same page and not be at all, and not know. And I've had so many games die because people have gone, oh wait, you're way more dark than I thought you were, or something like that. And I have the privilege of working on the Buffy the Vampire Slayer role-playing game, and had just a really successful campaign with it, because again, just really able to really get those sort of senses of this is what this means in that setting. And that's really what RPGs are really doing. What their main mechanic is trying to do is to tell people who you are and what is going on and what matters in that world, and we often do a very bad job of it. And a lot of people have suggested some different cards for the score that might be futuristic or science fiction or cyberpunk or something, and I've been like, no, I really want to narrow the genre down because of that reason as well. So it's all modern day, it's all this world, real world. There's no fancy magic and there's no cyberpunk technology, so that it just helps people go, I know exactly what I can and can't do. Just some, we can always bend it a little bit, we can, but the clarity of that, as you say, is just helps make sure that everyone understands the kind of things that are going to happen, which means they're not, again, it comes back to my character can do anything. Well, my character can do anything, but I'm going to be using this ability, and I know the genre perfectly, and I know the limits of what I can and can't do.
Yep, wise choice.
Yeah. GB Steve submitted, I think this is a really nice comment. It's been a long road since places to go, people to be, and it's great to see you getting the recognition. What has delighted you most along the way?
Well, that's a really big question, because that's Steve Dempsey, and we made a indie zine many years ago. I think we started in 1998. And so we're talking about it. I've actually been lucky to have enough that the career has been 25 years long now. And picking, delighting things. I love working on licensed games. I've loved working on Warhammer. That's been a great delight as well. And recently, something that just to pick one thing is that it's now been so long since I first worked on Warhammer that my lore has entered the sort of venerable old mystery. and new players, especially players who are discovering Kislev and things like that in the Total War games have found me online and found all my old notes and have called me up and gone, oh, you're some kind of expert. Can you tell us about this? Can you tell us about that? And that's just really lovely to sort of and to with those kind of really old and venerable licenses, you have that kind of weird eternal kind of constant. So there are things that I've added to the setting that have gone into the lore and are still remembered to this day. So small nudges and things like that to the Skaven and to cities, and they're in the computer game now, which is really exciting. And you just there's to have something like that. I mean, there's problems with license that are very big, but to be able to contribute to something that is going to go on and on and on, it's just been a really nice thing.
We had Andy Hall on last week, Steve, to talk about Total War Warhammer, and
he's the narrative designer for Total
Yep.
War.
Right, yep.
Yeah.
And he and somebody mentioned something about Kislev and asked Andy Law if that was one of his creations, and Andy said no, absolutely, that was Steve Dee. So you
that
were
was the song,
a fan,
the poem.
The poem, that
yes.
they took and set to music, Andy.
Oh, they
yes.
to rock.
Yeah.
That's actually really. That's speaking of sort of long loops. Is I wrote that poem 15 years ago or something for the Kislev book. It eventually got set to music, and then for the launch in Australia, they hired a local Australian heavy metal band to play their version of it to sort of at the launch event. And they live like one suburb away from me in Sydney. So
Brilliant.
They're like, how did we go all the way to England and all the way to this computer game and then come all the way back? They're called Battle Snake.
Battle Snake.
Yeah.
If you enjoy people who just love their metal, very, very pageant style, look up Battle Snake. They're great. And I see someone says they like the supplements I worked on for Tour.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much for that. It's gratifying.
I think that's, Andy, where you first and Steve first
met
on the Kislev book.
No, that's not where we've
No.
We'd been on multiple books sort of together, orbiting each other. The very first one I think would probably been the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Companion.
Where
the
Skaven book.
And then on the Skaven book, which came out after, because it came out just after that one, I did the mapping in that, and I ended up having to do communication. Then Night's Dark Bastards, I did a lot in that, and then we co-authored Realm of the Ice Queen, as I recall. And we were in a couple of other books together as well, like Shades of Empire, whatever it was called. So we've been in a few books together. We've been, I think Steve was also in Grimm for FFG. Because I was in that one too. We've orbited around each other at various points through the years.
And
I think it was. Oh, sorry, go. Yep.
Steve Seagoat says Steve Dee is now a lore master from the Dwarven depths who has no understanding of what has happened on the surface in recent years.
Yes. The Grimm was by Rob Schwab, who we met through Warhammer, and just a really good designer and a great boss as well.
Love Rob, although he does owe me a lot of digital beer. An awful lot, because we did so much together. And he was like, I owe you a beer, Andy. I owe you a beer. I owe you a beer. I owe you a beer, Andy. The number of times he said that, it reached it's a lot.
Yeah, at least a keg by now, surely.
Yeah,
so
quite.
We've actually reached the usual end of our stream of 8 o'clock. I know we got you slightly late, Steve, but I don't want to keep people on beyond when we said we would keep people on. Andy Law, any final thoughts?
I would like to say one thing. Admittedly, Steve came a bit late, so we didn't get much of a chance to talk to him. Hopefully he'll come back again later and we can have a fuller chat about something. But I want to drop just a little Stevie anecdote. When I was producing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, he got in contact with me and he said, hey, Andy, I know this person that I think that you should employ. He didn't do this because I had asked him to, or anyone else had asked him to. He did it completely off his own back. He was just helping out a friend of his who he thought was really talented and deserved a place in the industry. And I was like, well, if Steve says so, I'm right in. So I got in contact with them. and we sat down and we chatted. They wrote some samples up for me. Those samples turned into pieces of work. They were really good. So that turned into a full-time job that I offered. And in time, that turned into an assistant production job for B. Sherry, who was extraordinary at the job. And that's all because Steve reached out and helped someone else. Now, I'm bringing up this story because Steve is cool. Steve is awesome. He is one of the good people in the industry. And that means that I'm making an impassioned plea that if you've got yourself a few spare bucks, go check out his Kickstarter, because there are so few really good people out there in the industry that deserve support, and Steve is one of them. So please go out there and click that button. That's what I say. Buy the score.
Thank you. We are very close to getting our first stretch goal, and then we can announce some more. And we've got 35 hours to go. So yeah, check it out. And as I say, I think it's something that is quite different, which means it does need a little bit of love, because a lot of people are just going, well, it's not an RPG that I want to play. But I think you'll find if you don't like RPGs, you might love it, and if you do like RPGs, you might find a whole new kind of players who are willing to go, oh yeah, okay, I do get it, I do want to play this. And we've got all the demos on there and videos, so you can find out if you like it. And the print and play copies are pretty much ready to go. So as soon as we finish the campaign, you'll actually get your print and play copies.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. We'll leave that up as I say goodnight. So thank you for joining us tonight. We apologise for the technical hitches that we've had. We hope that James's shed in his garden is more reliable next time he joins us. And we hope Steve doesn't sleep through his alarm for anyone who's more important than us, because let's face it, we're not really that important. We don't mind. It's okay to be late here. So thank you as always, to all our patrons and everyone in the community who help make Inside the Rookery happen. Next week, we're joined by author J. Diane Dotson to talk about switching genres. But until then, thank you to Steve. A pleasure. I've heard so much about you, so much good things about you from Andy over the years. It's really a pleasure to actually finally meet you in person. Well, virtually in person.
Yeah.
Thank you to Andy, thank you to James, and to all our viewers. Please like, subscribe, share, do all the things that you're supposed to do, and we will see you again next week. But until then, all that remains to say is good night and caw-caw, caw-caw.
And stay on, we'll still be